In late August of 2016, an Australian family that looked completely ordinary from the outside suddenly vanished from their home in circumstances that no one could explain. The Tromps of Victoria had built a life that appeared stable, successful, and entirely predictable, yet within the span of hours, that image would collapse into one of the strangest stories the country had ever witnessed. Before we dive in, let me quickly say, every week 3 new murder mystery and true crime stories go live on this channel. If you're fascinated by unsolved cases, bizarre disappearances and chilling events, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss out. Mark Tromp, 51, and his wife Jacoba, 53, were considered the definition of hard-working Australians. They lived on a property outside Melbourne where they managed a thriving red currant farm and ran an earth-moving business that kept them well connected to their community. To neighbours and friends, the couple were reliable and industrious people, raising 3 adult children, Rihanna, 29, Mitchell, 25, and Ella, 22, while keeping both businesses running smoothly. By every outward measure, the Tromps had created a secure life. But on the morning of Monday, August 29, 2016, something seemed to snap. Without offering any warning or explanation, the entire family abruptly packed themselves into a vehicle and headed north. It was not a holiday. It was not even a planned trip. It was a desperate flight, and those who later learned of it were left asking, what could possibly drive an ordinary family to abandon everything in such haste? When Victoria Police entered the Tromp property the following day, the scene that greeted them raised more questions than answers. The farmhouse was not locked. Some vehicles remained parked in the driveway, keys still sitting in the ignition. The family's station wagon was gone, but inside the house, officers found something chilling: passports, bank cards, and mobile phones belonging to all 5 family members. These were things no one would leave behind on a normal trip, adding to the strangeness. Business documents and financial records were pulled out and left scattered, as though someone had been searching through them in a rush. They weren't thrown around in chaos, but arranged with a sense of urgency, suggesting the family had been looking for something specific. Police later described the atmosphere of the home as eerily methodical, not simply messy. In the weeks leading up to their disappearance, neighbours had noticed signs of growing anxiety in Mark and Jacoba. What began as stress soon escalated into paranoia. At least one of them had expressed fear that someone was planning to harm the family and take their money. Those closest to them would later confirm that these fears had become overwhelming. Among the 5, Mitchell stood apart. Though he agreed to leave with his parents and sisters, he was the only one who kept a phone with him. The others had left theirs behind in Sylvan. Mitchell would later explain that he only went along to keep an eye on everyone. In his view, his parents' behavior had become irrational, and he wanted to make sure nothing worse happened. But only 30 kilometers from home, the paranoia became impossible to ignore. Convinced that authorities, or some mysterious enemy, were tracking them, Mark and Jacoba demanded Mitchell throw away his phone. Reluctantly, he tossed it from the window. Through the rest of the day and well into the night, the family continued their strange journey. They travelled nearly 800 kilometres before reaching Bathurst, New South Wales, early on August 30th. At this point, Mitchell had had enough. The paranoia surrounding him was growing unbearable. He decided to leave the group and make his way back to Melbourne by train. That left Mark, Jacoba, and their daughters Rihanna and Ella to continue without him. Their next stop was the Jenelin Caves, a famous tourist site in the Blue Mountains. But even here the group fractured further. Unable to endure the rising tension, the 2 daughters made their escape by stealing a vehicle and driving south to Goulburn. When they finally contacted police, they revealed that their parents were still missing. By now, the story had reached headlines across the country. People were captivated by the sheer strangeness of it all. This wasn't happening in the isolation of the outback, far from help or supplies. The Tromps had been travelling through populated regions, with towns and highways all around them. Yet their journey had transformed into something that felt more like a nightmare, an odyssey fueled by invisible fears. Even after reuniting in Goulburn, the two sisters didn't stay together. At a petrol station, Ella announced she wanted to return home, saying she needed to look after her horses. She left Rihanna behind and drove south. By the time she reached the family property in Sylvan, police were already stationed there. Ella became the first Tromp child to be officially accounted for. The following day, Mitchell also made it back to Melbourne by train. Both siblings were rattled but otherwise in good mental health. Rihanna, however, was not so fortunate. Alone in Goulburn, she somehow climbed unnoticed into the back of a stranger's utility vehicle. Nearly an hour passed before the driver realized she was there. When he finally stopped, he found Rihanna in a distressed, almost catatonic state. She couldn't recall her own name or explain where she was. Authorities took her to Goulburn Hospital, where she was admitted for psychiatric care. Police chose not to pursue charges for the stolen vehicle due to her fragile condition.
Ella wasn't so lucky.
She faced legal consequences for her role in taking the car, though her case would later be resolved in court. Meanwhile, Mark and Jacoba continued their strange retreat. Driving south from the Jenolan Caves, they made their way back toward Victoria. Somewhere along the way, the couple separated under circumstances that remain unclear. Jacoba was eventually found wandering the streets of Yass, hundreds of kilometers away, in a highly agitated state. She too was admitted to hospital and placed under medical care, where, in a strange twist, she was reunited with Rihanna. Mark's fate, however, was still unknown. While Jacoba was receiving medical care in Yass, her husband Mark continued south on his own. Reports soon surfaced of strange behavior in Wangaratta, a regional town almost 600 kilometers from where the ordeal had first begun. Witnesses claimed he was tailgating a young couple at dangerously close range, following their car in a way that felt both threatening and erratic. Not long after, Ella's silver Peugeot, the same car the family had used to flee, was found abandoned. Mark had vanished on foot, leaving locals unsettled. Police also investigated a series of small break-ins that occurred in the same area, including an incident at a local motel. Although suspicion fell on Mark, authorities never confirmed his involvement. For days, sightings trickled in, but he remained missing. Mitchell and Ella, now safe at home, pleaded publicly for their father's return. Mitchell told reporters, "I've never seen anyone act like this. He's not dangerous.
He's my dad, my mate.
I just want him back safe." 6 days after the family first fled their property in Sylvan, the search finally came to an end. Police found Mark sitting by the roadside near Wangaratta Airport. He was disheveled, exhausted, but otherwise unharmed. Officers took him in for questioning and arranged for him to be assessed by mental health professionals. Shortly after, he was released into the care of his brother, who happened to be a police officer. When photographs of the moment hit the media, they sparked another wave of fascination. As cameras flashed, Mark lifted his middle finger in defiance, a gesture that quickly circulated across newspapers and social media. To many, it symbolized the sheer strangeness of the case, a family once viewed as quiet, hard-working, and respectable, now reduced to chaos and paranoia. But only days later, Mark's tone shifted dramatically. In a public statement, he apologized for the disruption, acknowledging the stress and confusion the ordeal had caused. He also expressed regret for the resources police and emergency services had devoted to searching for them. His words were humble, almost remorseful, in stark contrast to the bizarre events of the previous week. The question remained, what had actually happened to the Tromp family? Why would an entire household suddenly flee their home, abandon their possessions, scatter across multiple towns, and spiral into such confusion? Investigators quickly ruled out several possibilities. There was no evidence of financial ruin. The family businesses were stable, and they had no major debts that could explain such a desperate act. Some wondered if chemical exposure from farm work might have triggered hallucinations or psychosis, but testing dismissed that theory. There was no trace of poisoning. Instead, attention turned to psychology. Experts suggested that what happened was likely a rare case of folie à deux, a psychiatric condition also known as shared delusion. In such cases, paranoia begins with one person and spreads to others who are close to them, feeding on fear until everyone is convinced of the same distorted reality. In the Tromp family's case, it may not have been just two people. The paranoia appeared to sweep through nearly the entire household. Jacoba and Rihanna both remained under medical care for some time, showing clear signs of psychological distress. Ella later admitted that she too had started to believe some of her father's claims during the journey. For a time, she was convinced they really were being chased. Looking back, she described her father's mental breakdown as gradual but undeniable. In her words, it was confusing. Our state of mind wasn't in the best place. There wasn't one reason, it was just bizarre. Rihanna later told a magazine, "We're embarrassed. We never wanted to be famous. That's for other people." Her simple words reflected just how surreal the ordeal had been. For Mitchell, the experience was even harder to process. He explained that his main reason for joining the trip was to protect his family.
I couldn't just let them go.
I wanted to see where it would end up, but it was tough seeing my family like that. The main thing is, they're okay now. Theories continued to circulate in the months that followed. Some speculated that Mark's growing stress, combined with years of pressure from work, had triggered the crisis. Others suggested that family tensions had boiled over into paranoia. But, in the end, no single explanation was ever confirmed. What was clear was that mental health played a central role. A family with no official history of psychiatric illness had suddenly found themselves in the grip of something terrifying, their fears spiraling until reality itself seemed warped. In the years since, the Tromps have deliberately kept a low profile. They quietly returned to their property in Sylvan, resuming their farm work and trying to rebuild normal life. Ella's theft charges were eventually dropped after the car's owner reached an agreement with her. With the support of their community and medical professionals, the family slowly pieced their lives back together. But for the public, the case remains unforgettable. An ordinary, hard-working family abandoned everything, scattered across hundreds of kilometers, and convinced themselves they were fleeing an invisible threat. It's a chilling reminder of how quickly stability can collapse when fear and paranoia take hold. Even today, the Tromp family mystery lingers as one of Australia's strangest true crime stories, not because of violence or outside danger, but because of what can happen when the mind itself becomes the enemy.